Prologue. The Flash. The jungle heat was suffocating, damp air clinging to every uniform. Gunfire cracked in the distance, mingling with the thump of mortars and the roar of jets passing overhead. On this island, unnamed on most maps but vital to both sides, the U.S. Marines and Chinese PLA forces clashed in the ruins of a once peaceful fishing town. Sandbags, shattered storefronts, and burned-out tanks marked the front line. Marines dug in behind collapsed walls, rifles hot in their hands. Across the street, PLA soldiers crouched behind overturned cars, returning fire with the same desperate intensity. Neither side gave ground. Both sides bled. Then, a blinding flash of white light tore across the battlefield. Men and women on both sides cried out, blinded, then collapsed as if a wave of exhaustion swept over them. Weapons slipped from fingers. Helmets rolled across cracked pavement. Even the roar of artillery fell silent as thousands of soldiers across the island dropped into unconsciousness. Chapter 1. Awakening. Private First Class Miller's eyes fluttered open. He gasped, lungs aching as if he had been drowning. But the air was clean, dry, sterile. He lay on a smooth white floor beneath a ceiling of soft light that seemed to come from nowhere. Groaning, he sat up and froze. Stretching out in every direction were rows of men and women in uniforms. Marines in desert camo, PLA soldiers in green digital fatigues, Navy corpsmen, Chinese medics, thousands of them. Every rank, every patch, every flag, all unarmed, and all waking at once. Miller's pulse spiked as he realized he sat only a few feet from a Chinese soldier, her face streaked with dirt and ash, her eyes narrowing as she recognized the eagle and globe on his sleeve. She scrambled backward, fists clenched, as he mirrored the motion. Around them, chaos threatened to break out. Marines cursed. PLA shouted warnings. Some reached instinctively for weapons that weren't there. But there were no rifles, no pistols, no grenades, only uniforms, boots, and bare hands. "Where the hell are we?" a Marine sergeant bellowed. "Stay together," a Chinese officer barked, waving his troops into formation. The two forces eyed one another across an invisible line. The hatred of yesterday's battle still simmered in every stare. Then the walls shifted. Chapter 2. The Elder's Arrival. The sterile white walls rippled, as though made of water, before peeling away to reveal an immense chamber, vaulted, circular, and lit by towering spires of crystal that pulsed with soft light. From the far end of the chamber, something moved. Tall, robed figures glided forward, their bodies lean, their skin pale with a faint shimmer that suggested more than flesh. Their eyes glowed faintly, not with menace, but with an ancient weariness. The soldiers fell silent. Thousands of them, caught between suspicion and awe. One of the beings raised a hand. When it spoke, the voice did not come from its mouth, but filled every mind. "You are warriors, survivors of a world still at war with itself. We are the Alindra, an elder race. Long ago, we cast away war. We cast away the act of killing. But in doing so, we left ourselves defenseless. We cannot lift arms, nor take lives. And yet threats stir in the dark places of the galaxy. Threats that demand warriors." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Marines glanced at each other uneasily. PLA officers whispered among themselves. The being's voice softened. "You were chosen. In your world it appears you perished, lost in an accident of war. Your nations will mourn, but they will endure. Here you will serve a higher purpose. Fight for us. Fight for the survival of civilizations that cannot protect themselves." A furious shout broke the silence. A U.S. captain pushed to his feet. "Bullshit! You kidnapped us. You staged our deaths. We're not your damn slaves." On the opposite side, a Chinese colonel added coldly, "And why should enemies fight side by side? We were killing each other hours ago." The Alindra's gaze swept the chamber. "You may choose to hate one another, or you may choose survival. Alone, you cannot defeat what lies beyond. Together, you may, and when your service is done, you will be returned. But the memories of this war will be taken. It must be so. Your world is not ready." The chamber erupted in noise. Marines growled refusals. PLA soldiers clenched fists. But over the noise, the senior commanders began to speak, not to the aliens, but to each other. General Carter, U.S. Army, his uniform dusty from the battlefield, locked eyes with General Zhang of the PLA. Both men had faced each other across bloodied trenches only hours before. "General," Carter said lowly, his voice hard, "we can settle this fight later. Right now, we got bigger problems." Zhang's eyes narrowed. Then, slowly, he nodded. For now, truce. The soldiers on both sides looked stunned, but a seed had been planted. And as the Alindra watched in silence, for the first time in history, enemies who had sworn to destroy each other began to speak of survival, side by side. Chapter 3. The Enemy of My Enemy. The chamber buzzed with overlapping voices, English and Mandarin colliding in sharp tones, suspicion thick in the air. Soldiers shuffled closer to their commanders, glaring across the invisible divide. Private Miller couldn't take his eyes off the Chinese soldier across from him, the same one who'd tried to gun him down earlier that day. Her dark eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, Miller swore he saw the same thought mirrored back. Why am I not already dead? Above them, the Alindra remained silent, observing. Their crystalline robes pulsed faintly, as though recording every motion, every word. They had not moved since delivering their ultimatum, yet Miller felt the weight of their gaze press like a mountain against his chest. General Carter stood taller than his age suggested, his weathered face carved into lines of command. He raised a hand, demanding quiet from his Marines. Listen up. Right now, we don't have rifles, we don't have ships, and we don't have a way home. We do have discipline. That means we're not about to tear each other apart in a room full of aliens. He shot a glance toward the Alindra. The PLA side bristled at the words, but General Zhang's deep voice cut through the tension like a blade. He is right. Your anger is wasted. If these beings speak truth, then what lies ahead will test us more than each other. His tone carried no warmth, only cold pragmatism. A Marine sergeant muttered, Yeah, and pigs'll fly before I trust a red. The words didn't go unnoticed. PLA soldiers stiffened. One, a young corporal with a scar across his cheek, snapped back in accented English. Better a red than a coward hiding behind a gunship. The room shifted again, walls bending, reshaping until the soldiers found themselves standing in a vast arena. The floor gleamed metallic, etched with strange glyphs that glowed faintly under their boots. Above them, holograms flickered to life, grotesque, insectoid beasts with chitinous claws and mandibles dripping venom. Rows upon rows of them, their eyes glowing like embers. Gasps rippled through both American and Chinese ranks. The Alindra's voice resonated once more. This is what you will face. The Vorax, a predator race bred for nothing but conquest. They spread across worlds like fire through dry grass. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be bribed. They devour. The holograms lunged, snarling, before dissolving back into mist. The silence that followed was heavier than any battlefield fog. General Carter's jaw tightened. So that's why we're here, cannon fodder. No, the Alindra replied, their voice calm as still water. You are not fodder. You are the only hope. Of all the worlds we have observed, only yours has not forgotten the ways of war. Miller swallowed hard, throat dry. Forgotten war? What kind of galaxy was this? General Zhang's gaze lingered on Carter, then shifted back to the Alindra. We will fight, he said finally, but only under conditions. When this war is done, you return us, all of us. And our memories? Carter added, his voice sharp. The Alindra inclined their heads slowly. Your memories of this war will be erased. It must be so. The balance of your world depends on it. But perhaps memory is not needed for growth. Even shadows can shape the soul. Neither general looked satisfied, but for now, neither could refuse. Carter extended his hand across the gulf of soldiers. It hovered in the air for a moment, a gesture heavy with centuries of blood and mistrust. Zhang's jaw tightened. Then, with a short exhale, he clasped Carter's hand. The Marines and PLA troops erupted into murmurs, some shocked, some furious, some grudgingly relieved. For the first time, enemies stood under the same banner, survival. The Alindra's voice thundered one last time before the chamber dissolved into light. Then it begins. The forge of war will bind you or break you. Choose wisely. And with that, the soldiers of two great nations were hurled into a future none of them could have imagined. Chapter 4. Words Without Barriers. The chamber reformed around them again, no longer an arena, but a council hall of sorts. Smooth stone-like walls arched high overhead, etched with flowing symbols that none of the humans recognized. At the center, a raised dais glowed with pale light. Generals Carter and Zhang stood there side by side, separated by a rigid few feet but united by circumstance. Both had spoken to the Alindra in halting exchanges, their voices overlapping with confusion. Zhang raised a hand, his English thick but steady. General Carter, we do not understand each other fully. Our words are... He searched, then snapped his fingers toward his interpreter, who fumbled through a pocket notebook. Blurred. Carter gave a short nod. Yeah, I get you, but it's slow. He turned to the Alindra. If you expect us to fight for you, we're going to need to do better than this. The Alindra responded without moving their lips, their thought voice echoing through the chamber. We anticipated this. Your tongues differ, but thought may bridge what sound cannot. A shimmer of silver light rippled down from above. Thin motes, like dust made of starlight, drifted onto every soldier, every officer, every man and woman. Miller gasped as one speck landed against his temple, then melted into his skin like liquid mercury. He cried out, clutching his head. All around him, Marines and PLA soldiers grimaced, staggered, or swore. The sensation was brief, sharp like a static shock, then gone. Son of a... but stopped short when he realized the words had come out in English, and the Chinese soldier across from him had understood. Her eyes widened in shock. Then, just as startled, "You, I understand." Across the chamber, whispers rose in two languages that were suddenly one. Marines and PLA soldiers tested it with insults, with jokes, with cautious questions. General Carter exhaled slowly. Well, that's one problem solved. Zhang's expression remained stony. This may solve words, but not trust. The generals turned back to the Alindra. Start talking, Carter ordered. You want us to fight? Then brief us. Who are these Voraks? What do they use? What can kill them? Holograms shimmered to life, towering insectoid bodies with armored carapaces, claws like scythes, and eyes that burned with cold hunger. The projection zoomed in to reveal black, hardened plates that seemed to flex with every movement. Their armor is natural, the Alindra explained. Dense as starship hulls. Conventional metal weapons bounce away. Only plasma, concussive charges, or blades made from their own shed carapaces can pierce it. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Marines muttered curses. A PLA officer raised his hand. And their weapons? The image shifted. The Voraks carried elongated limbs tipped with organic launchers, hurling bolts of acid and shards of hardened resin. Their weapons are themselves, the Alindra said. They need no rifles, no tanks. They are born armed. Carter's fists clenched. So what do we get? Rifles? Armor? Tanks? Anything? A pause, then the alien's answer fell like ice water. We have none. The silence that followed was deafening. Colonel Davis of the Marines barked, You drag us here to fight monsters that spit acid and you don't even give us a rifle. General Zhang's voice cut in, low but sharp. Then we must build our own. All eyes turned toward him. Zhang looked across the chamber at the American officers. Your nation builds carriers and aircraft. Mine builds fleets and industries. Both build weapons. Here, he glanced around the sterile chamber. Nothing. So we design. Carter grunted. A truce, not a partnership. But yeah, we'll need something. Guns, explosives, armor. If they've got hides like battleship steel, then we're gonna need penetration. A Marine corporal muttered, and a damn bayonet to stab him with when the mags run dry. His buddies snickered, the gallows humor breaking the tension for a moment. Even some PLA soldiers smirked. Zhang folded his arms. We will require plans. Factories, resources. If these Alindra cannot give us weapons, they must give us the means to create them. The Alindra inclined their glowing heads. We will provide materials, but it is you who must forge the tools of war. We cannot. The chamber filled with murmurs again, skepticism, suspicion, grudging determination. Carter's voice carried over it all. Fine, you wanted warriors? You've got 'em. But understand this. He jabbed a finger at the nearest Alindra. We fight our way. That means tactics, grit, and steel. And if we bleed for you, then you damn well better hold up your end. The Alindra only bowed their heads. Zhang glanced sideways at Carter, then back at his own troops. Then let the truce hold. For now, we will not fight each other, not while monsters wait outside. The words rang out across the chamber. It wasn't peace, it wasn't friendship, but it was the first step toward war, together. Chapter 5, The Forge of Distrust. The Alindra guided them into what could only be described as a hangar, vast, cathedral-like, its ceiling so high the echoes of bootsteps seemed to vanish before they returned. Rows of crates and raw blocks of materials, gleaming alloys, translucent crystals, coils of black cables that hummed faintly, were arrayed like offerings. To the soldiers, it looked less like a warehouse and more like a junkyard designed by a god. Materials, the Alindra intoned. Forged by us for peaceful creation, never for war, but your hands may shape them otherwise. General Carter scanned the rows, then muttered to Zhang, "Looks like Legos for giants." Zhang's lips thinned, though the translation implant carried the dry edge of amusement. Better than nothing. The soldiers react. The troops fanned out, curiosity overtaking fear. Marines ran their hands along the metal blocks, whistling low. "Hell, Sarge, this feels like titanium, but weighs less than my rifle," one said, hefting a slab onto his shoulder. On the opposite side, PLA engineers crouched by a stack of crystals, whispering to each other, sketching quick equations on the floor with chalk they'd fashioned from broken rock. Private Miller found himself near the same Chinese soldier he'd stared down earlier. She eyed him as he tapped one of the humming cables. "You touch wrong, you explode," she said flatly. Miller snorted. "Lady, if it blows, we'll both be decorating the ceiling." Her eyes narrowed, but for the first time he thought he saw the hint of a grin tug at the corner of her mouth before she turned away. Clashing approaches, Carter gathered his officers with Zhang across a central table that the Alindra had conjured from light. The surface projected schematics whenever a soldier placed a material upon it, as though the table itself wanted to help. Marine engineers immediately began sketching rifles, crude, boxy things designed to spit plasma if the crystal cells could be rigged to discharge. Zhang's officers took a different approach. They sketched pole arms tipped with shard blades, launchers powered by compressed energy coils, disciplined formations with overlapping fields of fire. "Always so complex," grumbled Gunnery Sergeant Willis, watching the PLA draw elegant curves. He jabbed a thumb at their own sketch. "Meanwhile, we're sticking a bayonet on a lightning gun and calling it a day." A young PLA corporal overheard, replying in clipped tones, "Simple weapons break first. Ours will endure." Willis leaned forward, his voice hard. "Endure don't mean a damn if you're dead before you fire the thing." The argument rose, soldiers pressing closer, hands tightening into fists, breaking the tension. The first shove came quick. PLA corporal against U.S. private. Boots scraped the floor, curses flew. Marines surged forward, so did the PLA, both sides colliding in a knot of snarls and swinging arms. Private Miller ducked as a stray fist clipped his helmet. "God damn it! This is stupid," he barked, grabbing his own squad mate by the collar before he threw a punch. "Back it off!" Gunnery Sergeant Willis roared, bull rushing through the scuffle, dragging Marines off the pile. PLA officers did the same on their side, barking orders sharp as whip cracks. The brawl died down under the glares of their generals. Carter's voice thundered across the hangar. "Enough! You think those bugs are going to care if you were Army, Marine, or PLA when they rip your guts out?" Zhang followed, his tone ice cold. "Every blow you throw at each other weakens you before the enemy. Do you want to die here, nameless, because you could not control your pride?" The silence afterward was heavier than armor. The first step slowly, soldiers returned to the materials, the anger still simmering, but now directed into their work. Marines lashed cables to alloy rods, creating the first crude energy discharge tubes. PLA engineers perfected stabilizers, using crystals to focus blasts into spears of light. Different approaches, different philosophies, but the same goal. Private Miller watched as his accidental partner, the Chinese soldier with the faint grin, slid a shard of crystal into a brace she'd welded. It hummed, then crackled with caged power. "Not bad," he admitted grudgingly. She gave him a sidelong glance. "Better than your stick with bayonet." Miller chuckled despite himself. "Guess we'll see who kills more bugs." She didn't answer, but this time the grin was unmistakable. By the end of the day, the hangar buzzed with invention. Prototype weapons lined the tables, ugly, unstable, but real. Carter and Zhang studied them from the dais. Neither man smiled. But for the first time, both allowed themselves the faintest ember of hope. Not trust, not yet, but a beginning. Chapter 6. Baptism by Fire. The alarm came without warning. A chime reverberated through the hangar, low and urgent, followed by the Alindra's thought voice booming in every mind. "A colony is under siege. The Vorax have come." The chamber walls peeled away, revealing a starlit expanse. In its center floated a fragile city of glass and crystal towers rising from the crust of a verdant moon. The spires shone like prisms, but black shapes swarmed its surface, thousands of insectoid figures clawing, tearing, devouring. The Marines and PLA troops stared in stunned silence. Then the Alindra's voice struck again. You wished for weapons. Now you will test them. You wished for unity. Now you will prove it. The floor beneath their boots shimmered, and then they were there. The colony under siege Private Miller staggered as his boots hit alien soil. The air was sharp with ozone and acrid smoke. Buildings of crystal loomed overhead, many already shattered, their shards glittering across streets slick with alien ichor. And then came the sound. Skittering claws, mandibles clicking, a hive's worth of chitin grinding against stone. Contact! Someone shouted. Vorax surged down the street, towering beasts on four limbs, plated in obsidian armor, their eyes glowing with hungry red fire. Some hurled gobs of sizzling acid that ate through walls. Others fired spines that shattered crystal like glass. Open fire! General Carter bellowed. The first shots. The prototypes came alive. Marines hefted crude energy rifles, metal tubes with glowing crystals slotted into their chambers. They spat wild arcs of plasma that hissed through the night, sizzling against Vorax hides. The PLA unleashed their spear launchers, crystalline bolts exploding into bursts of concentrated light. Soldiers formed disciplined ranks, firing in volleys. The first Vorax collapsed, its chest plate melting under a focused blast. A ragged cheer went up, cut short when three more leapt over the carcass. A Marine corporal squeezed his trigger. Click. Nothing. He slammed the side of his weapon, cursed, then drew a makeshift blade, charging forward with a roar. Damn thing's overheating, another yelled, yanking a glowing cell out before it exploded. Chaos and improvisation. Private Miller crouched behind a shattered spire, firing bursts until his rifle spat sparks. A Vorax barreled toward him, claws raised. Shit! The Chinese soldier, the one with the grin, slid past him, jamming her crystal spear into the creature's underbelly. It shrieked, thrashing, before collapsing in a heap. She wrenched her weapon free and shouted, "Together!" Miller gritted his teeth and drew his bayonet-bladed energy rifle. Guess bayonets aren't so dumb after all. The two fought back-to-back, plasma bolts and crystal spears cutting down another beast. Holding the line across the colony square, Marines fought with raw fury, unloading bursts at point-blank range. PLA squads advanced in tight formation, their disciplined volleys punching through armor plates. But the Vorax were endless. For every one that fell, three more came clawing over its corpse. Acid rained down, sizzling through shields. Spines tore through armor. Gunnery Sergeant Willis bellowed, "Keep shooting, you bastards! Make 'em choke on their own dead!" "Form ranks," a PLA officer screamed. "Do not break." The two commands overlapped, clashing, until soldiers realized the only way to live was to blend them. Marines held ground while PLA lines advanced in disciplined bursts, covering gaps, trading formations without speaking. It wasn't trust, it was survival. The turning point, General Zhang spotted a massive Vorax tearing through a column of Alindra civilians, towering, armored thicker than the rest. "Heavy!" he barked, pointing. General Carter didn't hesitate. "All squads, focus fire, drop it!" Energy bursts, crystal spears, and sheer human rage tore into the beast. Weapons sparked, overheated, jammed, but soldiers kept firing, screaming, charging with blades when their rifles failed. The beast roared, staggered, and fell, crashing into a crystal spire. For the first time, the Vorax line faltered. Aftermath. Hours later, the square was silent but for the hiss of smoke. Vorax bodies littered the streets, black ichor staining the alien crystal. Soldiers slumped against walls, some clutching wounds, others staring at their half-melted weapons. Private Miller spat dust and looked at the Chinese soldier beside him. "Not bad for a first date," she smirked faintly, wiping ichor from her cheek. "You are terrible date." Nearby, Carter and Zhang stood side by side, surveying the wreckage. Neither smiled. "This won't hold forever," Carter muttered. "No," Zhang agreed. His eyes hardened. But today, it held long enough. Above them, the Alindra appeared, robes glowing faintly. "You have done what we could not. You are warriors, and now, you are bound." The soldiers didn't cheer. They were too tired, too wary. But as they looked at each other across the battlefield, Americans and Chinese, enemies only yesterday, they realized something terrifying. They had survived together, and that meant they would have to again. Chapter 7. The Dreams Myths of War. The hangar felt different when they returned. It wasn't the size, still cavernous, still filled with alien alloys and humming crystals. It wasn't the silence, though it was heavy, broken only by the clang of tools and the hiss of cooling cells. It was the eyes. Marines and PLA soldiers no longer looked at each other with pure hostility. Suspicion still burned, but it was joined now by something new, grudging respect. They had bled together on alien soil. They had seen each other stand when weapons failed, had seen discipline mesh with fury until they survived. That bond was stronger than any treaty, breaking the walls. General Carter leaned against the hollow table, watching schematics flicker. Zhang stood across from him, arms folded. "Those rifles of yours jammed up like they were made from scrap," Zhang said flatly. Carter didn't bristle. "And your spears didn't have the stopping power we needed." Silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, Carter smirked. "So let's stop bitching and fix both." Zhang's eyes narrowed. Then after a beat, he nodded once. Agreed. The words rolled like thunder through the ranks. For the first time, both generals were in step. The forge of ideas, the Alindra provided more materials. Crystals in new hues, alloys that bent like cloth but hardened under heat, vats of biogel that seemed alive. To them, these were curiosities. To the humans, they were possibility. Workshops bloomed overnight. Marines hacked together power packs the size of rucksacks. PLA engineers wove crystal conduits into sleek designs, reducing heat buildup. Together, they fused them into the first stable plasma rifles. But it didn't stop there. Private Miller watched, wide-eyed, as a squad of Marine mechanics argued with Chinese engineers over a towering frame of alloy. It started as a joke. Hell, why not just build a walking tank? But sketches grew, parts assembled, and within days, the skeleton of a bipedal machine loomed over the hangar. "Like Gundam," a PLA soldier muttered. "Like a damn linebacker with rockets," a Marine replied. They both laughed and kept welding. Warships and heavy weapons. The Alindra were silent observers, watching in disbelief as humans repurposed their peaceful technology. Crystals that once powered entire cities were fused into ship reactors. Within weeks, crude but powerful warships drifted in Alindra dry docks, bristling with plasma batteries and missile racks designed by both nations. Heavy weapons took form as well. The PLA refined long-range crystal cannons, accurate to the meter, while Marines devised portable plasma throwers that belched arcs hot enough to slag a Vorax in seconds. When a Marine strapped dual weapons to a harness and grinned, "Call it the backpack barbecue," even the PLA cracked smiles. Blending strengths exercises were rushed, chaotic but essential. PLA squads drilled in rigid formations, shields interlocked, rifles raised in perfect timing. Marines laughed at the rigidity until they saw how it absorbed a simulated charge. Marines countered with their own style, spread formations, aggression, overwhelming firepower. The PLA officers frowned at the recklessness until they saw how fast it broke through a defensive line. So they adapted. PLA discipline provided the wall, Marines provided the spear. Together, they became something neither side had managed alone. The first mobile suits. The day the first mobile suits walked out of the hangar, every soldier stopped to stare. 20 feet tall, plated in alloy and crystal, powered by fusion packs, the machine moved with startling grace. Its pilot, a Marine, tested the controls, flexing alloy fists and igniting a plasma blade that hissed like a sun in miniature. A PLA officer climbed into the second prototype, his suit armed with long-range cannons mounted on its shoulders. When the two machines saluted one another, the hangar erupted in cheers. Miller watched with awe. "We were fighting over an island back home," he muttered. "Now we're building giant robots to fight space bugs." The Chinese soldier beside him grinned. Better war. Unity and necessity, Carter and Zhang stood side by side on the dais, watching their forces drill together. For the first time, there was no sneer, no smirk, only a shared pride they didn't dare admit aloud. "We've built an army," Carter said quietly. "No," Zhang corrected. His gaze followed the mobile suits as they thundered across the field. "We have built something greater, a force the Vorax will learn to fear." Above them, the Alindra whispered to themselves in tones the implants couldn't fully translate. Words like terrifying, unnatural, unstoppable echoed faintly. But the humans didn't notice. They were too busy preparing, for war had come and they were ready to meet it head-on. Chapter 8, The Dawn of Respect. The Alindra Council chamber glowed with its usual soft brilliance, but the atmosphere was charged. Tall, robed figures stood in a circle, their crystalline eyes reflecting the hologram projected above them. Human-built warships sliding from dry dock, mobile suits testing their weapons in thunderous exercises, soldiers of two enemy nations training as one. "They reshape our gifts into weapons of war," one Alindra whispered. Another answered, not with fear but with reverence. "And yet, do you not see? They are doing what we cannot, what we abandoned. They do not revel in war. They prepare for it with purpose." The eldest among them inclined his head. "They are warriors, not beasts. Their hands bring death, yes, but also protection. Perhaps this is what we needed all along." For the first time in centuries, the Alindra spoke not of fear but of respect. Rising to the call came swift and urgent. A Vorax hive fleet had descended upon the Alindra border world of Kyrith, its crystalline cities already under siege. Unlike the colony skirmish before, this was no raid. It was annihilation. General Carter and General Zhang stood shoulder to shoulder aboard the Vanguard, humanity's first warship. Through the viewport stretched a sky of fire. Alindra refugee craft fleeing as Vorax swarms rained from orbit. Carter's jaw tightened. "Looks like it's showtime." Zhang nodded once. "Then let us show them what humanity can do." The first combined arms assault, the Vanguard roared forward, plasma batteries spitting blue fire into the void. Behind it, a flotilla of human-forged warships followed, sleek hybrids of American brute force and Chinese precision engineering. Their salvos tore into the swarm, ships that had once been prey suddenly becoming predators. Below, the ground shook as the first mobile suits dropped into the fray. One slammed down in the center of a Vorax horde, its pilot screaming over comms as a plasma blade cleaved through armored chitin like butter. Another, heavier suit planted itself on a ridge, shoulder cannons thundering, each blast shattering clusters of Vorax like fireworks. Between them, Marines and PLA infantry advanced, plasma rifles and crystal launchers barking in deadly harmony. Marines surged ahead, reckless and furious, while PLA units locked into disciplined firing lines, covering their flanks. Together, they moved like parts of one organism, feral strength guided by steel discipline. The Vorax howled, but for the first time, they faltered. Respect earned. In orbit, Alindra vessels lingered at the edge of the fight, their captains hesitant, unarmed. But their councils watched through the eyes of the fleet, astonished. "These humans, they adapt with every breath," one whispered. "See how their machines move, one strength shielding another's weakness. They fight as if they were born for this." The eldest Alindra rose slowly, voice deep and solemn. "Not born for war, born for survival. And now for us, survival wears their face." The turning point. On Kyrith's shattered plains, the Vorax unleashed a massive war beast, towering over even the mobile suits, armored in plates thicker than starship hulls. It roared, acid torrents spilling across the battlefield. For a moment, the human line wavered. Then Carter's voice boomed across comms. "Hit it with everything." Zhang's calm command followed. "Focus fire. Discipline. Break its shield, then strike." The suits surged forward, Marines hammering from the flanks, PLA gunners pounding its legs. Plasma fire melted its plates. Crystal lances pierced its chest, and finally, two suits crossed blades in its shadow, driving weapons deep into its heart. The beast collapsed, shaking the earth. Cheers erupted across the battlefield, ragged, defiant, victorious. The aftermath. As the smoke cleared and the last Vorax fled, the Alindra descended. Not as masters, not as overseers, but as witnesses. They moved among the exhausted soldiers, their robes dim in humility. To Carter and Zhang, they bowed. "We asked you for warriors. You gave us more. You gave us protectors." Carter, bloodied but grinning, only shrugged. "Protectors, huh? Let's just say we hate bullies," Zhang added, his voice steady. "Respect is earned in blood. Today, you have ours, and we have yours." The Alindra inclined their heads. "Yes, respect. For the first time in centuries, we remember what it means." The soldiers didn't cheer. They were too tired, too wary of what battles still loomed. But in that moment, they knew something had shifted. They weren't just fighting for the Alindra anymore. They were fighting with them. And for the first time, the galaxy's oldest race bowed not in command, but in respect, toward humanity. Chapter 9, Debates and Dark Horizons. The Alindra Council chamber shimmered with light, but the mood was restless. the holographic display of Kyrith's battlefield replayed in silence. Human warships roaring into the swarm, mobile suits cleaving through beasts, Marines and PLA shoulder to shoulder, holding the line where the Alindra themselves never could. "They are effective beyond measure," one counselor murmured. "Too effective," another countered. "Look at them. They reshape our tools into terrors. Warships, giant machines of death, cities turned to arsenals." A third elder leaned forward, his crystalline eyes glowing faintly. "And yet, who else could have stopped the Vorax? Not us, not in centuries. If we deny them greater power, we doom ourselves." The chamber filled with rising voices. "They are saviors. They are conquerors waiting to bloom. They must be guided. They cannot be restrained." At last, the eldest Alindra raised his hand. "Respect is not without caution. The question is not whether to give them power. It is whether to give them all the power." Among the humans in the forges, humans were restless as well. General Carter leaned over a hollow schematic of a battleship, chewing on the end of an unlit cigar. "We need bigger reactors. These little cruisers are fine for skirmishes, but we'll need capital ships if the bugs decide to throw a real party." Zhang, standing opposite, folded his arms. "Agreed, but the Alindra hesitate. They fear giving us too much." "They respect us," Carter said, "but they don't trust us. Hell, can you blame them? We don't even trust each other half the time." Nearby, Private Miller and his Chinese counterpart tinkered with a rifle, arguing over power cell placement. The banter had shifted since Kyrith, still sharp, still biting, but now with the rhythm of comrades rather than enemies. "You overload again, and it explode in your hands," she teased. "Yeah? Well, at least it'll take one of them with me," Miller shot back. They laughed, though both knew their weapons would be tested again sooner than they liked. The escalation. The alarm came without warning. A scout vessel staggered into orbit above Alindra Prime, its hull half dissolved by acid, its crew nearly dead. Before the ship even docked, its desperate message pulsed across every channel. The Vorax had unleashed a fleet larger than any ever recorded, and it wasn't heading for the fringes. It was driving straight for the heart of Alindra space. The council erupted in panic. "Impossible," one cried. "The Vorax never strike at our core." But denial gave way to horror as sensor readings streamed in. Dozens of hive ships, each the size of a mountain, with swarms numbering in the millions. The Alindra turned their luminous eyes toward Carter and Zhang, summoned urgently to the chamber. "This is not a battle," an elder said gravely. "This is extinction." Limits tested within hours, humanity's hybrid fleet surged to intercept. Warships hummed with untested modifications, mobile suits readied their blades and cannons, soldiers locked weapons into place. The first clash came like a tidal wave. Hive ships belched acid projectiles the size of buildings, entire Vorax broods slamming into human lines. The vanguard shuddered as plasma bolts hammered its shields. Carter gripped the command rail, shouting over the chaos. "Keep the line! No one breaks, or they'll roll us flat." Zhang's voice came through comms like steel. "Discipline! Target the brood ships! Sever their command nodes!" But for every Vorax ship destroyed, 2 more pressed in. Mobile suits fought in desperate knots, blades glowing, hulls scorched, their pilots screaming defiance even as systems overheated. Marines and PLA infantry defended choke points in boarding corridors, their weapons sputtering and failing under the sheer weight of bodies. Private Miller found himself firing until his rifle was molten hot, then ripping a shard blade from a dead Vorax and hacking like a madman. His Chinese partner fought at his side, their backs pressed together as they were swarmed. "Too many!" she shouted. "Then we kill too many!" Miller roared back, swinging until the Eker drenched them both. The Alindra's choice high above the battle, the Alindra Council watched in silence. Their protectors, their chosen warriors, were straining to the breaking point. "They cannot hold," one whispered. "Even their brilliance has limits." "But they fight still," another countered, eyes bright. "Look at them. They bleed, they falter, but they do not break. Not for themselves, but for us." The eldest Alindra's voice rang like a bell. "Then the answer is clear. We give them everything, all our knowledge, all our resources, not because they are flawless, but because they will use them when we cannot." And so, for the first time in millennia, the Alindra reached into their deepest archives, unlocking technologies older than most stars. The tide of battle had not yet turned, but humanity was about to be armed with the full legacy of the galaxy. Chapter 10: The Weight of Silence. The battlefield was quiet now. Vorax carcasses lay piled in grotesque mounds, ichor congealing into black rivers that ran between shattered spires and scorched soil. The sky, once blazing with plasma fire and acid streaks, was a dull gray haze, veiled with drifting debris from hive ships torn apart in orbit. Human warships floated above the world like wounded predators, hulls scarred, shields flickering, entire decks sealed off by emergency bulkheads. The Vanguard limped in low orbit, trailing smoke from its engines. On the ground, Marines and PLA soldiers moved among the ruins, not in triumph, not in cheers, but in silence. The roll call Private Miller sat on a cracked crystal block, helmet in his lap, uniform blackened by acid burns. Across from him, his Chinese partner crouched with her rifle propped against her knee. Neither spoke at first. Around them, medics worked in silence. A Marine captain read off names in a low, steady voice, each one followed by silence where once a soldier had answered. When Miller finally broke the quiet, his voice was hoarse. "Half my squad's gone." His partner didn't look up, but her words were steady. "More than half of mine." They sat together, their grief parallel but shared. Nearby, Gunnery Sergeant Willis lit a piece of cloth torn from a Vorax carcass, planting it like a flag over a pile of Marine helmets. A PLA officer paused, then quietly added a strip of his own torn insignia beside it. No one spoke, but every soldier who passed by added something small, a patch, a knife, a bead of crystal, until the mound became a shrine. The duality, the Alindra, descended in silence, their robes dim with humility. They had expected exhaustion. They had expected rage. But they had not expected this. Warriors kneeling in stillness, heads bowed, their weapons laid aside as they honored their dead. One elder whispered, "They kill with unmatched fury, yet they mourn with equal depth. They are two halves of a whole we cannot understand." Another added, "We thought war consumed, yet for them, war and grief are inseparable." The eldest Alindra's crystalline eyes lingered on Carter and Zhang, standing together at the edge of the field. Perhaps this is their strength, not just their weapons, not just their will, but their memory. Generals in the ashes. General Carter removed his cap, running a hand over his gray hair. His voice was rough, almost breaking as he looked over the field of helmets and makeshift shrines. "Every name we lose is a weight. Doesn't matter if it's here or back home, it stays with you." Zhang stood beside him, posture rigid, but his eyes betrayed something more. "In my culture, we say the dead walk with us. Perhaps your people say the same." Carter nodded slowly. "Yeah, we call it carrying the fallen." The two generals, enemies once sworn to destroy each other, stood in silence. For the first time, their grief was indistinguishable. The Alindra's revelation. Later, in the council chamber, the elders spoke in hushed tones. "They fight with unmatched ferocity. They mourn with a tenderness we abandoned long ago. This duality, it is what makes them whole." The eldest Alindra bowed his head. "They are not just warriors. They are guardians. They do not fight for glory. They fight so they may mourn fewer tomorrow." And in that moment, the Alindra understood something they had forgotten for millennia, that the power to destroy and the power to grieve were not opposites, but twins. The weight carried forward back in the barracks, soldiers shared quiet stories of the fallen. Marines spoke of jokes cracked in foxholes, of hometowns left behind. PLA soldiers shared memories of families, of comrades who had once been rivals, then brothers in arms. Private Miller sat with his partner, both staring at the flickering shrine. "You think they'll remember us back home?" he asked. She gave him a sideways look, then shook her head. "Not this. Not us. They said memory's gone." Miller swallowed hard. "Then we remember. For them." She didn't answer, but her hand brushed his for the briefest moment before pulling away. Above them, war loomed larger than ever, but for now, humanity carried its grief, and the Alindra carried their awe. Chapter 11: Forged as One. The barracks were heavy with silence. Names still echoed in memory, shrines flickered with soft light, and the ache of loss pressed on every chest. Yet, in that stillness, something unexpected grew. For the first time, Marines and PLA soldiers sat together, not across from one another, but beside each other. Helmets and rifles lay in the same piles. Meals were shared without dividing lines. Jokes, though subdued, passed across the room in broken English and Mandarin alike, the implants bridging what hearts could not. Private Miller sat with his Chinese partner, a half-finished rifle across their knees. They worked in silence at first, sliding cells into place, adjusting stabilizers. Then, quietly, she said, "No more yours, no more mine, one weapon." Miller tightened a bolt, then gave a short nod. One weapon. The unlocking of knowledge, above them, in the Alindra Council chamber, the eldest elder raised his crystalline staff. "We have debated, we have feared, but fear is not respect. These warriors have shown us grief, and in grief they have shown us purpose. They are worthy." Ancient archives unlocked, spilling secrets across the forges. Blueprints of ships that had not sailed in millennia, weapon matrices older than some stars, armor designs abandoned when war was cast away. The Alindra trembled as they shared the knowledge, not because of fear, but because they remembered what it had once meant to wield it. The human response. The hangar blazed with light as schematics came alive. Where once Marines and PLA had drawn separate designs, now their sketches overlapped, melded into a single canvas. Engineers from both sides worked shoulder to shoulder, translating Alindra technology into something practical, deadly, and unmistakably human. Warships grew larger, more resilient. American brute force fused with Chinese precision, their hulls bristling with plasma lances and shield matrices woven like living light. Heavy weapons took shape. Cannons the size of towers, portable mortars that folded into backpacks, rifles tuned to fire in bursts or continuous streams depending on the formation. Mobile suits became more than machines. Blades designed by Marines for close-quarters brutality merged with PLA long-range artillery systems. One carried shields broad as walls, another bore thruster packs for shock assaults, and together they became an army of giants. Every weapon carried the imprint of both. The blending of strengths training shifted as well. Formations no longer split into national lines. Squads mixed deliberately. Marines reinforcing with aggression, PLA anchoring with discipline. Soldiers began to anticipate each other's movements, filling gaps without needing orders. Private Miller's squad was half PLA, half Marines. They trained with a rhythm that felt alien and natural at once. Miller covered angles recklessly, his partner's precision saving him from overextension. In return, his wild charges drew enemy attention, giving her squads the seconds they needed to line perfect shots. One night, as they stripped weapons together, she muttered, "We fight like left hand and right hand." Miller grinned. "Guess that makes us one fist." Alindra awe from their observation spires, the Alindra watched. "Do you see?" one whispered. "They no longer remember enemies. They remember only survival." Another elder added, voice thick with wonder, "Not survival alone. They create. They forge what never was, because they dream what could be." The eldest Alindra bowed his head. "We gave them tools. They made them into hope. They are not our weapons. They are our teachers." The forge complete weeks later, the first of the Unity-class warships rose from dry dock, its hull engraved not with American stars nor Chinese dragons, but with a symbol newly forged, a circle split by fire and steel, joined again at the edges. The crews cheered as it drifted free, its guns humming with energy. On the ground, mobile suits lined the field, towering over infantry squads who saluted in unison. The weapons were no longer ours or theirs. They were human. General Carter looked at Zhang as the new fleet assembled before them. For the first time, he smiled without hesitation. Not bad for two old dogs who were supposed to be killing each other. Zhang allowed the faintest smile in return. "We were enemies. Now we are brothers in war." Above them, the Alindra lowered their heads, not in command but in respect. Humanity had done what they could not, forged unity through grief, and turned dreams into steel. Chapter 12, Trial by Fire. The fleet assembled at the edge of the Vorax system, a sea of steel and light gleaming against the black. Dozens of human-forged Unity-class warships hovered in formation, their hulls alive with plasma conduits and shield lattices that shimmered like auroras. Mobile suits clustered in their bays, giants crouched and ready to be hurled into the storm. Mixed squads of Marines and PLA stood on deck, silent, every face etched with the memory of names left behind. At the center, the Vanguard floated proud, her scars repaired but still visible, reminders carved into steel. General Carter stood at the command rail, hands gripping tight. General Zhang stood beside him, as always. Both gazed at the image before them, the Vorax hive world. It writhed like a scar across the stars, a swollen planet of blackened carapace, towers of resin stretching skyward, rivers of acid carving scars across its surface. Hive ships orbited it like hornets, their swarms already stirring at the intruder fleet. "This is it," Carter said, his voice low but carrying. "No hit and run, no skirmish. This is the heart of the beast." Zhang's eyes narrowed, calm as ever. "Then we strike at the heart, and we do not stop until it ceases to beat." The first clash, the Vorax came like a tidal wave. Hive ships spewed endless swarms, black silhouettes blotting out starlight. Acid projectiles streaked across space, glowing green and vicious. "Open fire!" Carter roared. The Vanguard's cannons blazed, hurling beams of plasma that ripped through the first swarm. The Unity-class fleet responded in kind, their salvos synchronized in flawless rhythm, Chinese precision guiding American fury. Entire hive ships erupted, their carcasses tumbling into the void. But for every one destroyed, 3 more surged forward. The swarm thickened, pressing hard against shields. Hulls rattled under the onslaught. "Deploy the suits," Zhang ordered. The mobile giant's launch bays opened, and humanity's newest weapons thundered into the void. Mobile suits ignited thrusters, streaking across space like meteors. Some carried plasma blades the size of starships' fins, cleaving through Vorax brood carriers in blazing arcs. Others unleashed long-range cannon fire, each blast splitting the swarm with surgical precision. On the surface below, drop pods slammed into the resin fields, exploding open to release infantry squads. Marines surged ahead, reckless firestorms of plasma rifles and grenade barrages. PLA squads followed close, disciplined volleys carving advancing lines into the swarm. Together, they stormed the hive world's crust, humanity's boots pressing into alien soil for the first time. The battle turns the Vorax responded with their greatest weapons, Titans. Monstrosities larger than buildings, their armored hides layered with plates that shimmered like obsidian steel. Acid cascaded from their maws, rivers that melted squads whole. "Titans incoming!" a comms officer shouted. Miller's voice crackled in over the comms, half panicked, half exhilarated. "Guess this is where we find out if the toys work." 2 suits charged forward, one wielding dual plasma sabers, the other bristling with artillery pods. They struck in unison, blades slicing joints, artillery shattering plates. The Titan reeled, roaring, before collapsing in a river of acid that boiled the ground. Infantry scrambled, covering each other, Marines dragging PLA wounded to cover, PLA marksmen cutting down Vorax that tried to overwhelm Marine flanks. There was no division now, only survival, only unity. The Elindra watch high above. Elindra vessels remained unarmed, their crews silent. But the elders watched the feat of the battle, their voices hushed with awe. They wield our knowledge as if it were always theirs. They fight not for conquest, but to carve life out of death. Look, they bleed together, but none fall alone. The eldest elder's voice trembled with reverence. This is war, but it is also art, and it is something only they could create. The heart of the hive, Carter leaned over the hollow table, eyes fixed on the crimson pulse at the hive world's core. "That's it, their command node. You kill that, you cut off the head." Zhang gave a short nod. "Then we drive the spear." Orders surged across the fleet. Warships pushed forward, carving a corridor of fire. Mobile suits dove like angels of death, their blades alight. Infantry stormed deeper into the resin towers, each step bought in blood. Private Miller and his partner fought at the front, their rifles empty, their blades burning bright. "For them," he muttered, slamming his weapon into a Vorax chest. "For them," she echoed, firing a final burst into another's skull. Above, the Vanguard unleashed its main cannon, a beam of molten white that cut straight into the hive's heart. The world shook. The hive screamed, and then it died. Aftermath. When silence fell, it was the silence of victory. Vorax carcasses burned across the plains. Hive ships drifted, broken in orbit. Humanity stood bloodied, scarred, but unbroken. On the command deck, Carter exhaled slowly, his hand gripping the rail until his knuckles whitened. "We did it!" Zhang stood tall beside him, his voice steady. "No, we did it." And for the first time, both men smiled. Above, the Elindra bowed their heads once more. Not to saviors, not to conquerors, but to humans. Warriors who had turned grief into strength, and division into unity. Chapter 13. Echoes After the Fire. The hive world smoldered. From orbit, it looked less like a planet and more like a cauterized wound. Great resin towers lay shattered, rivers of acid boiled into clouds, and broken hive ships fell in flaming arcs through the atmosphere. The humans gathered in the silence of aftermath. Warships limped in formation, crews patching ruptured hulls. Mobile suits stood half-scorched in the dry docks, their pilots climbing down with eyes hollow from exhaustion. Infantry patrolled blackened plains, not to fight but to search, for survivors, for answers, for anything left alive. Private Miller sat against the hull of his battered drop pod, his rifle across his knees. His Chinese partner joined him, helmet tucked under her arm. They didn't speak at first. They just stared out at the broken horizon. Finally, Miller said, "That's one world down. How many more?" She glanced at him, then at the burning sky. Too many. The council debrief. On the Vanguard, Carter and Zhang stood before the Alindra counselors who had arrived in person, their robes dim as if ashamed. "You asked us to fight," Carter began, voice rough from smoke and shouting. "And we did. We won. But tell me," he leaned forward, his eyes hard, "does it have to be this way every damn time? Burn one world after another until nothing's left?" Zhang followed, his tone quieter but sharper. "The Vorax fight like beasts, but beasts fight for survival, not conquest. Can they be reasoned with, surrendered to, broken of their hunger?" The council chamber filled with uneasy murmurs. The Alindra exchanged glances, their luminous eyes flickering. Finally, one elder spoke, voice tinged with disbelief. "You wish to speak to them?" Carter barked a humorless laugh. "Hell, I don't want to. But if there's even a chance, if there's something inside them that listens, we'd be fools not to try." Another elder whispered, almost to themselves, "They think of ending war, not just winning it." The soldiers' reflections. In the barracks, talk drifted among the survivors. "We killed thousands, maybe millions," a Marine said quietly, staring at his boots. "Not enough," muttered another. "Maybe too many," added a PLA corporal, drawing silence around him. They weren't just trading war stories anymore. They were asking questions. Questions soldiers were rarely allowed to ask. Miller leaned forward, speaking softly to his squad. "If the bugs can't talk, fine. We keep fighting. But if they can, if there's even a chance," he swallowed hard, "I don't want to carve another shrine." His partner said nothing, but her eyes softened. The Alindra's unease back in the council chamber. The debate turned inward. They seek peace even after victory. Peace with the Vorax is impossible. They are predators, nothing more. Yet we said the same of humans once. The eldest Alindra finally broke the silence. "We have no knowledge of the Vorax beyond war. But perhaps our ignorance is the problem. We never sought to learn, we only fled." They looked at the humans, standing silent but resolute. Carter's jaw was set, Zhang's eyes calm. Both generals representing a species that could fight like no other, and still ask if there was another way. The Alindra bowed their heads, not in agreement, not yet, but in recognition. A dual nature revealed later. On the hangar floor, the soldiers gathered. Warships hummed, suits loomed, weapons gleamed. But it was not the machines that defined the moment. It was the questions. "Do we fight until every Vorax is dead?" a Marine asked aloud. "Or do we try to end the fight another way?" a PLA officer countered. The room buzzed with debate. No shouting, no fists, only words, weary but sincere. Miller finally spoke up, his voice carrying further than he intended. "Maybe that's what makes us human. We fight like devils, but we don't want to. If there's a way out, we'll find it, or die trying." The hangar fell silent, then slowly soldiers nodded, Americans and Chinese alike. Above them, unseen in the observation spires, the Alindra whispered to one another, "Warriors who seek to end war. Destroyers who dream of peace. They are not what we expected." And for the second time, the Alindra found themselves caught off guard, not by humanity's strength, but by their refusal to let strength alone define them. Chapter 14. The Trap at Black Spire. The war drums beat louder each day. In the vast hangars of the Vanguard fleet, Marines and PLA soldiers rearmed for the next engagement. Suits of alloy and crystal were patched and reinforced, warships reloaded with new plasma cells, and infantry drilled in blended squads that no longer cared about flags. At the center of it all stood General Carter, scarred, tired, but unbroken. He watched as suits lined up for inspection, cannons thundered in tests, and squads shouted in cadence together. His voice cut through the din like a blade. Load heavy, lock tight, and look out for the bastard next to you. We don't break, we don't stop, and we don't lose. This time, we finish it. Cheers rolled across the hangar. Humanity was ready, but not all their battles would be fought with guns. The mission of hope. A lone Vorax outpost had been spotted on the edges of a ruined moon, a spire of resin and chitin, pulsing with eerie light. For the first time, the swarm had not destroyed their sensors or fired on approach. Instead, they had signaled, not in words but in patterns, a rhythm that the Alindra claimed might be communication. The council argued. Half cried for destruction, the other half for caution. In the end, compromise emerged. A small detachment would approach, seek parley, and test if the Vorax were capable of more than slaughter. The detail was mixed: Marines, PLA infantry, one mobile suit escort. At their head stood Colonel Liang of the PLA, flanked by a single Alindra elder whose robe dimmed with unease. Before departure, Carter clasped Liang's arm. "This feels wrong." Liang's face was steady, his tone calm. "Perhaps, but if there is a chance, even a small one, we must take it. You know this, General." Carter's jaw tightened, but he released his grip. "Then you watch your six, and theirs." Liang gave the faintest nod. "Always." The shuttle touched down on resin ground, the air thick with acrid smoke. The Vorax outpost loomed above, a tower of black and red, its walls shifting as though alive. The humans advanced cautiously, rifles lowered but ready. The Alindra elder walked at the front, hands raised in a gesture of peace. Colonel Liang stood beside him, every step steady despite the tension crawling up his spine. The spire's gates opened, shadows moved within, and then Vorax emerged. Dozens at first, then hundreds. They did not charge, they did not roar. They simply surrounded the humans, mandibles clacking in a rhythm that almost resembled speech. The elder's voice trembled in their minds. "They are trying. I think they are trying." Liang raised a hand, ordering his troops to hold. The Vorax parted, revealing a massive chamber inside the spire. The humans and the elder stepped forward, hearts pounding with something that almost felt like hope. The betrayal inside, the walls pulsed with sickly light. Resin platforms rose like teeth from the ground. The Vorax clustered around, mandibles clicking louder, faster. The elder extended his hand, luminous eyes wide. "We come to." The walls sealed shut. The sound changed. Clicking became screeches. The Vorax surged. "It's a trap!" A Marine shouted, raising his rifle. Plasma bolts lit the chamber, cutting into black carapace. The Vorax shrieked and closed in, acid spraying, claws hammering. Liang roared orders in Mandarin, his voice carrying through implants. "Fall back! Protect the elder!" The squad formed a circle, firing in every direction. Vorax fell, but more pressed in, an endless tide. The sacrificed. The elder stumbled as acid splashed nearby, robes smoldering. A Vorax titan burst from the floor, towering, claws descending toward the circle. Liang didn't hesitate. He drew the last charge from his rifle, sprinting forward with a roar. His shots hammered the titan's chest, staggering it just long enough for him to leap onto its leg. He jammed a plasma grenade deep into its joint, locking eyes with the elder. "Go!" he shouted. The grenade detonated, tearing the titan apart in a blaze of fire and acid. The shockwave ripped the chamber open, clearing a path. Marines and PLA dragged the elder through the breach, firing wildly as they ran. When the smoke cleared, Liang was gone. The seal of fate. The survivors staggered back to the shuttle, the elder shielded by human hands. Behind them, the spire closed once more, as if nothing had happened. The Vorax did not pursue. They did not roar. They simply sealed the outpost tight, their clicking echoing like laughter. On the flight back, silence filled the shuttle. The elder's eyes were dim, his voice a whisper in their minds. "We thought perhaps there was more, but they showed us only teeth, and one of you paid the price." The Marines and PLA soldiers said nothing. Their faces were steel, their grief silent. When the shuttle docked, Carter was waiting. The moment he saw Liang's absence, his face hardened. "They sealed their fate," he growled. "Every last one of them." Zhang, standing nearby, bowed his head. For the first time, his stoic mask cracked. He died not as a PLA officer, not as Chinese, but as human, for all of us. And in the silence that followed, every soldier knew the truth. The Vorax had chosen war. And now, humanity would bring it to them. Chapter 15: The Rallying Cry. The memorial was simple. On the hangar deck of the Vanguard, amidst rows of armored suits and humming rifles, a single helmet rested atop a plasma rifle. Draped over it was Colonel Liang's torn insignia, burned at the edges where acid had eaten it. Around it, soldiers of both nations stood shoulder to shoulder, Marines in desert camo, PLA in green fatigues, mechanics with grease-stained hands, pilots still smelling of coolant and smoke. General Carter stepped forward first, voice heavy. He walked into hell so others could walk out. That's the kind of man he was. That's the kind of man we all gotta be if we want to see this through. Zhang followed, his tone quiet but strong. Colonel Long gave his life not for China, not for America. He gave it for humanity. He showed us what we must become. One people, one army, one purpose. The hangar fell silent. Then slowly a Marine slammed the butt of his rifle against the deck. A PLA soldier mirrored it, then another. Soon the entire hall echoed with the thunder of thousands, one beat, one rhythm, a single army born of grief and defiance. From that day, every mission, every order, every battle carried his name, Liang's oath. The shift the Alindra elders watched from their observation spire. They mourn, yet they rise stronger. They do not fracture, even when death strikes their leaders. Loss does not weaken them, it binds them. The eldest bowed his crystalline head. We asked them to be warriors. They became something greater. They are unity forged in fire. For the first time, the Alindra authorized not just support, but full cooperation. Their ancient archives opened wide, shipyards redirected, every resource poured into humanity's hands. Forging the war front. In the weeks that followed, the fleet transformed. Warships grew vast, carriers the size of cities, each packed with mobile suits and drop pods. Mobile suits evolved into specialized classes, heavy shock frames with dual plasma cannons, agile interceptor frames bristling with thrusters, guardian frames wielding shields broad enough to cover platoons. Infantry wielded refined plasma rifles, modular launchers, and armor that shimmered with Alindra shielding fields. The hangars buzzed day and night with welding arcs and shouted commands, Marines and PLA indistinguishable as they worked side by side. Private Miller and his Chinese partner stood over their repaired suit, its armor freshly plated, its blade glowing faintly in the dark. Miller smirked tiredly. Guess Liang got his wish, huh? No more us and them, just us. She tightened the last bolt and gave a short nod. Just us. The Galactic campaign begins. The first strikes came swift and brutal. Unity fleets jumped across the stars, their warships roaring into systems long overrun by Vorax. Plasma batteries and crystal lances carved hive ships apart, mobile suits rained down like angels of war, infantry stormed resin towers with fire and steel. In one system, Marines led the charge through acid rivers, their recklessness matched by PLA squads who locked shields and covered every flank. In another, mobile suits danced through space, pairs of American and Chinese pilots flying in perfect tandem, one striking while the other shielded. Everywhere they went, the Vorax faltered. For the first time in millennia, the swarm was not advancing, it was retreating. Respect made law. In the Alindra Council chamber, elders watched the campaign unfold. Their voices carried awe, not fear. They move as one. Their unity is terrifying and beautiful. They do not fight for conquest, but for survival, for one another. Perhaps they will not just save us, perhaps they will save the galaxy itself. The eldest rose, his voice solemn. Let it be written in our records. Humanity is not an army. Humanity is not an ally. Humanity is the shield and the spear of all free peoples. A new horizon. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Carter stood beside Zhang as the fleet regrouped from another victory. Stars stretched ahead, worlds still waiting, hives still burning. This is just the start, Carter muttered, his hand tightening on the rail. Yes, Zhang agreed. We have much to do, but now we do it as one. And as the fleet jumped into the void, humanity carried not just its weapons, but its oath, that Liang's sacrifice would not be in vain, and that the Vorax would learn the meaning of unity. Chapter 16: The Spark of Allies. The galaxy burned. Unity fleets leapt from system to system, striking hive clusters with a precision and ferocity that stunned even the Alindra. Every battle left wreckage, blackened Vorax hulls drifting among stars, resin towers collapsing into dust, acid rivers boiling away under plasma fire. But for every victory, whispers spread. Whispers carried on refugee vessels, on hidden signals from long silent outposts, on eyes that dared to hope again. The Battle of Sereth's Ring. The Unity fleet surged into the Sereth system, where Vorax had encircled a gas giant's moon colonies in resin and fire. General Carter's warships blasted through the blockade, plasma lances tearing open brood ships. Zhang's formations pressed forward in unbreakable lines, mobile suits diving like thunderbolts into the swarm. Infantry slammed into resin strongholds, Marines storming with raw fury, PLA covering every breach with disciplined precision. Private Miller and his Chinese partner fought side by side in a mobile suit squadron, blades igniting as they carved through a titan that threatened to crush a civilian dome. Their victory rippled across the system in real time, seen by millions huddled in hiding. For the first time in centuries, the swarm broke and fled. Eyes from the shadows. Across the galaxy, other civilizations watched. On the crystal plains of the Tyrians, insectoid scholars trembled as the news came. The humans had not only survived but driven the Vorax back. "They do not hide," one whispered. "They fight." "They bleed," said another, "and yet they rise." On the ocean world of the Seri, song-voiced leaders wept as they saw recordings of Liang's oath, Marines and PLA beating their rifles in unison. "They mourn as we do," the leader sang, "and still they do not break." Even among the fractured clans of the iron-skinned Korgath, whose warriors once believed themselves alone in defiance, murmurs spread. "If these humans can kill titans," their chieftain rumbled, "then perhaps we can stand again." The rally expands back aboard the Vanguard. Carter paced the command deck as reports came in. "Transmission from Tyrian space," an officer called. "They want to send ships, supply, maybe fighters." "Siri are offering medical fleets," another added. "And the Korgath," Zhang said quietly, scanning the feed, "say they wish to fight alongside us." Carter smirked, though his eyes remained grim. "Guess somebody lit a fire under this galaxy." Zhang folded his arms. "Hope is more dangerous than fear. Once awakened, it cannot be silenced." The next front. The Unity fleet didn't fight alone anymore. At Kyrie's prime, Tyrian skirmish craft darted like knives, weaving between human suits. At Vela's belt, Sherry medical vessels pulled wounded from burning ships faster than any human corpsman could dream. At the storm world Juthrak, Korgath shock troopers slammed into Vorax lines with hammers that cracked armor plates like glass, their roars echoing with marine battle cries. Everywhere, the swarm that once dominated now bled. The Elindra's revelation. In the council chamber, the elders whispered in awe. "They are not only warriors, they are firebrands, they are leaders. They remind the galaxy not just how to fight, but why." The eldest bowed his head. "We thought them dangerous, and we were right, but not to us, to those who prey on us. They are the danger hope needs." Toward the stronghold. On the Vanguard's bridge, Carter and Zhang studied the latest star maps. At the center of it all pulsed a single mark, the Vorax stronghold world. A planet swollen with hive structures, brood queens, and a swarm larger than anything yet faced. Carter grunted. "That's where they're breeding half this nightmare." Zhang's eyes narrowed. "Then that is where the war will be won, or lost." Behind them, the crew looked out across a fleet no longer human alone. Elindra ships pulsed with light. Tyrian craft darted like silver arrows. Seri medical vessels sang softly through the void. Korgath war cruisers glowed red with their forges. And at the center, humanity stood, no longer divided by nation, no longer alone. The galaxy had found its shield. The galaxy had found its spear. Chapter 17, Ashes of the Shield. The Unity fleet hung at the edge of the Vorax stronghold system. A nightmare star burning red over a swollen hive world covered in black resin and endless swarms. Every sensor screamed with hostile signals. General Carter leaned against the command rail of the Vanguard, his face etched with exhaustion. "We're outnumbered, as always." Zhang stood beside him, silent a moment before replying. "Yes, but not alone." The bridge's display lit up. Tyrian skirmish craft in gleaming formations, Seri medical fleets pulsing with soft light, Korgath war cruisers bristling with cannons, Elindra support ships weaving shields of crystal light. Behind them all, humanity's warships and mobile suits, fewer now, scarred, patched together, stood ready. The battle unleashed. The Vorax swarmed like a living tide. Hive ships poured forth in the tens of thousands, blotting out stars. Titans the size of mountains broke free of orbit, acid rivers pouring from their maws. "Fire!" Carter roared. The Vanguard's main gun thundered, slicing through a hive ship. Unity fleets unleashed their wrath. Tyrian craft darted through swarms, striking weak points with surgical precision. Korgath shock cruisers slammed headlong into brood ships, detonating at close range, their warriors roaring even in death. Sari medical ships dove through firestorms, dragging wounded suits and vessels back from the brink. And at the front, Marines and PLA fought shoulder to shoulder, mobile suits cleaving titans, infantry blasting through resin towers. But the cost was brutal. The dwindling line, human casualties mounted with every passing hour. Entire companies were wiped out in acid storms. Mobile suits went dark, their pilots burned alive in molten armor. A Marine battalion held a ridge for 17 minutes before it collapsed under waves of Vorax bodies, their last stand buying precious time for allies to regroup. Private Miller's suit shuddered under a Titan's blow, armor splitting. He fought on with half his systems offline, his Chinese partner covering his flank with precise bursts. "We can't hold much longer," Miller shouted. "We don't have to," she replied through gritted teeth. "We only have to open the way." The Allies rise. For every human squad that fell, Allies surged to fill the gap. Tyrian insectoid soldiers took up Marine rifles and fired in their place. Korgath shock troopers held shattered corridors with their massive shields, roaring defiance. Sari healers sang over the dying, keeping them alive just long enough to fight again. On the comms, voices mixed into one. American drawls, Mandarin commands, Tyrian chitter, Sari song, Korgath growls, all carried by implants as if spoken in one language. Unity, not in symbol, but in blood. Breaking the heart, Zhang pointed to the tactical display, his voice steady despite the chaos. "There, their breeding node. Destroy it, and the swarm will unravel." Carter slammed a fist onto the console. "All ships, all suits, all squads, drive the spear!" The fleet surged forward, carving a burning corridor into the heart of the hive world. Mobile suits thundered ahead, Marines and PLA stormed the resin towers, Korgath crushed beasts under hammer blows, Tyrian fighters strafed weak points. At the tip of the spear, humanity bled, but humanity did not break. Chapter 18. The Last Oath. The hive heart loomed, a mountain of resin and chitin, pulsing with red light, brood queens shrieking from within. Around it swarmed the greatest Vorax horde ever seen. A wall of claws, acid, and fire. "Forward," Carter bellowed. "For every name we carry." Marines charged with bayonet-mounted rifles glowing white-hot. PLA squads advanced in perfect volleys, each step a hammer blow of discipline. Miller's mobile suit, battered and sparking, ignited its blade one last time as he and his partner fought their way into the breach. The Vorax roared, but the Unity Army roared louder. The sacrifices. The Hiveheart shields flared, a wall of energy no weapon could pierce. Carter cursed, slamming the rail. "It's not enough." Then the Korgath chieftain's voice boomed over comms. "Our lives are fuel. Take them." Entire Korgath cruisers rammed the shield, detonating in titanic fireballs. Tyrian craft swarmed into the gaps, blasting open fractures. Sherry healers poured their last reserves into holding the wounded long enough to fire again. And through the firestorm, humanity led the charge. The end of the swarm. The Vanguard's main gun fired one final time, its core overloading, tearing its own hull apart. The beam struck the weakened shield, shattering it. Miller and his partner drove their suit forward, blade blazing, plunging into the heart of the hive. Every surviving suit and soldier poured fire into the breach. The brood queens screamed as the mountain of resin erupted, collapsing in fire and light. The Vorax swarms faltered, then fell silent. Across the battlefield, hive ships went dark. Titans froze mid-roar, acid rivers ceased to flow. The swarm was broken. Victory in ashes. When silence fell, it was not triumphant. It was hollow, heavy, filled with the weight of countless dead. Humanity's ranks were shattered, fewer than half surviving, but their allies stood around them. Tyrian, Korgath, Sari, Elindra, not as rescued peoples, but as brothers in arms. On the ruined surface, Carter stood beside Zhang, both bloodied and worn. Carter's voice cracked, but it carried. "We were supposed to kill each other. Instead, we saved the galaxy. Together." Zhang nodded slowly. "Then let this be our oath. No more divisions. Not among us. Not among any who fought here." The surviving fleets echoed that oath in every tongue, translated but understood. Humanity had led, but all had won. And as the galaxy turned toward rebuilding, one truth remained unshakable. The Vorax were finished. And humanity, once two enemies locked in war, had become the unbreakable heart of a new alliance. Epilogue: the choice of memory. The war was over. The hive worlds burned no more. The endless swarm was shattered, their titans broken, their queens silenced forever. Across the stars, silence spread, not of despair but of relief. Worlds long hidden began to breathe again. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy was free. On the surface of the Alindra's capital world, survivors gathered in the Council's great chamber. Its crystalline walls reflected the scars they carried, the weapons they forged, the friendships they'd bled for. Humanity stood at the center, fewer now, but unbowed. The eldest Alindra's voice filled the hall, soft but resolute. You were brought here as enemies. You became brothers. You were asked to be warriors. You became protectors. Now, you are given a final choice. The chamber grew still. Soldiers shifted, eyes narrowing, hearts heavy. The two paths. If you wish to return to your world, the elder continued, we will honor that. But memory of this war must be erased, for your world is not yet ready. You will awaken in your homeland, believing only that you were lost and returned. Life will continue, with all its wars, its divisions, its strife, but your families will know you again. A pause, long and heavy. Or you may remain, here in the council to guide us, to teach us how to prepare for what may come, for the unexpected we cannot see. You will not return home, but neither will you be forgotten. You will live as guardians of a galaxy that now owes you its freedom. The words sank deep into every heart. The dividing line. The soldiers looked at one another, Marines and PLA, allies and friends. Eyes locked, unspoken questions hung heavy. Family or duty, past or future. Private Miller stared at his hands, calloused and scarred, then at the Alindra elder. His chest ached with the memory of his mother's voice, of the little sister he hadn't seen in years. Quietly he whispered, I have to go home. His Chinese partner placed a hand on his shoulder, then withdrew. I will stay. She said softly, we have built something here. I cannot leave it. Their eyes met. Neither tried to change the other's choice. On the day of departure, the chamber was divided in two. One group, smaller, quieter, stood ready to remain, their uniforms already blending with the Alindra's robes. They carried no flags, no insignias, only the memory of unity, of sacrifice, of shared battle. The other group, larger, heavier with tears, prepared to return home. They lined up in silence, glancing at one another as if trying to memorize every face before memory itself was stripped away. General Carter clasped Zhang's forearm, their eyes hard but warm. Guess this is goodbye, old friend. Zhang shook his head once. Not goodbye, just another front. You teach them there. I'll teach them here. They held each other's gaze, then stepped back. The final farewell. The Alindra raised their hands, light spilling across the chamber. The ones who chose to return felt warmth seep into their minds, memories folding inward like pages closing in a book. They saw the faces of comrades, the fire of battles, the shrines of the fallen, and then it all dimmed. Those who stayed watched in silence, tears unashamed. They knew their brothers and sisters would awaken back on Earth, unaware of what they had saved, but alive. And when the light faded, the chamber was quiet again. The legacy on Earth, families embraced returned soldiers who could not explain where they had been. They carried scars, nightmares they could not name, and an ache in their hearts for something just beyond memory. Some drank to silence it. Some dreamed of stars. In the council, those who remained became teachers. They showed the Alindra, the Tyrian, the Korgath, the Seri, all who joined, what it meant to prepare, not just to fight. They built war games, trained with discipline, drilled for the unexpected, and in quiet moments they lit candles for the names they alone still remembered. The final oath. The eldest Alindra looked upon the humans who had stayed and whispered to his kin, We feared them once, now we are alive because of them. They are not our weapons, they are our hope. And so it was written into the stars. Humanity came as enemies. They became brothers. They bled as warriors. They stayed as guardians. Not all remained, not all remembered, but all were bound by the oath forged in blood and fire, that unity could outlast even war. And somewhere, beyond memory, beyond division, humanity still stood watch.